everyone. My name is Sarah Roberts. I am beginning my program in assessment, curriculum, and teaching with a focus in STEM. I am currently going to my fifth year of teaching. All 5 years, I've been lucky enough to be at Eisenhower Middle School within Norristown School District. My main subject is math. I usually teach seventh and eighth grade. Outside of school and work, some of the things I love to do, one of them being traveling, both in and outside the United States. My husband and I have been fortunate enough to visit at least 15 different countries. We've been to Italy, Switzerland, trying to think, Germany, Austria, all over Europe. My family is actually from Ireland, so we've been there a handful of times, stayed with family, we've done all the sightseeing stuff. It's a lot of fun and hoping to go back in the next year or two. So definitely one of our favorite hobbies. In addition to that, I love baking. Before becoming a teacher, I was actually a cake decorator at a local bakery in the Willow Grove area. I used to do wedding cakes and all that stuff. So that's a lot of fun for me. It's something I just do on the side. And finally, one of the last things that has been a big part of my life these past couple of years, almost decades, is cheerleading. I cheered throughout high school and college, and I actually now currently coach two cheer squads. I coach a middle school team in Upper Dublin, and I also coach the varsity cheer team at Abington High School. So very busy, but I love all of it, and I'm excited to take this course with everybody. As for my prior experience with online learning, as you can see, I have more experience as a teacher rather than a learner in online. So I am excited for this course to see where I can improve and further my knowledge. So as a learner, again, I haven't really done it much. The last time I've done it formally as a class was when I was an undergrad in 2015. It was my last class actually that I needed before graduating. And during that time, online classes were starting to become a thing, but it wasn't as common as it is today. So there were a lot of obstacles I experienced there as a student. So that definitely opened my eyes when I did have to become an online teacher through COVID. But aside from that one course back in 2015, the only real learning I have done as a student or anything like that on the online side is through district PDs. And it's more through Schoology, our learning module system, some Zoom meetings, things like that, but nothing to the extent that I'm experiencing now with this program. So I am excited to learn and grow. Now, as I said, as a teacher, have plenty of more experience, as many of you probably do as well. COVID definitely threw us through a loop. Pre-COVID, Norristown School District, we had very little access to technology. We had about 10 or so Chromebooks or iPads per class, and that was on a good day. So typically, it was more used as an additional tool to get work done, but not actually utilized in the best way to enhance their learning. So pre-COVID wasn't really a big opportunity for us. As COVID hit, though, in March of 2020, just like many of you, we were kind of thrown into the whirlwind of everything. We originally started with, we'll be back in 2 weeks. We then got that email saying to start building some lessons online. So that was fun. During that time, we didn't really have it structured. So most of us just kind of pre-recorded lessons and released them on Google Classroom and emailed students. That was the best way we found during that time, with it being thrust upon us with little technology. However, over that summer, we learned that we would be entering the school year pure virtual, so we had a little bit more time to get prepared. We learned different tools, Schoology, Google Meet, Edpuzzle, different office hours online. So definitely grew as a teacher during that time, and we ended up that year hybrid. Students had the opportunity to either come in to the classroom or stay virtual. That was honestly probably one of the biggest struggles throughout COVID as a teacher, having to teach those kids in front of you while having a monitor next to you, answering kids at home, and having all of that all at once was definitely a lot. Having tools that were accessible for both in person and online, and unfortunately not having direct instruction myself as to how to implement that, how to use that properly. So that was definitely probably one of the biggest struggles. Now, post COVID, we are lucky enough, like most schools, to be one-to-one technology. So all of our students do have Chromebooks, but we are all face-to-face. So a lot of us, me especially, have created web enhanced classes where the students have their Chromebooks. We do some things on there, the ed puzzles, extra practice, research, things like that. But we also do things in our math workbooks, asking questions, hands-on activities. So as COVID has progressed, my learning as a teacher has progressed, and I feel like I am starting to understand better ways to use technology to help my students, not just to keep them busy on their Chromebooks. Now, with that being said, I'm not perfect. After reading through his article, I noticed some things stood out to me as like, yeah, that's me. I could improve on that. So one of the things that really popped up to me was him stating establishing clear expectations and support. As a teacher, and especially during COVID, we wanted to have patience for our students and their families, understanding everyone's adapting. And I think having that mindset kind of just stuck with me with online learning. So a lot of the times I'm not as clear and direct with my expectations for assignments and communication in and outside of school in the online format. I wanted to make sure everyone had that opportunity, knew I was here, and didn't really set those standards. So that's something moving forward and reading through it that I can put that out there to say when things need to be done, when it will happen, when it won't happen, to yes, allow flexibility, but also make some structure. With that, one of the things they talked about was having previous online experience and how their experience with online learning changes how you teach. You see some pros, you see some cons. I mean, as I just said, I didn't really have much experience as an online learner myself, as an actual student. And I can't go back and change that, but I'm hoping through this program, I'm going to be able to relate to my students from the student perspective of online learning, what some pros, some cons, what can be improved, what I can change. But those two things definitely, if I could go back in time and change, I would love to, but I'm hoping to make improvement from here. As for some of my, I feel like, well-developed skills, one being my technology skills. Um, During COVID, again, there wasn't a lot of people coming in and telling us exactly do this or if you need that. A lot of it was me going on to different sites and just clicking around and figure out what works. Um, and most of the time, I think I was able to make those connections and I was able to help my coworkers when they had questions and things like that. Um, I have no problem Googling or YouTube, like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And following the steps and even reaching out to different companies and asking them if they have any tips and tricks. Um, as the years have gone on, I have tried all different resources, and I not only check in with myself, I check in with my students, see what do they think helped, what do they think could be improved upon, and so on. And I kind of keep that in my back pocket and I go and build on from there. Some of the skills that I have found that I really enjoy and I think have been productive is Schoology, Edpuzzle, Nearpod, Quizlet, things like that. I found that the students enjoy them and there's improvement in what they're bringing back into the classroom. So that's awesome. In addition to that, flexibility was a big thing as well. I know myself and a lot of other teachers in my building, we like to, have full reign over everything that's happening, having in a controlled area, things like that. So flexibility, I think teachers we all have, but at times there's an extent as to how flexible, but I do feel like that is one thing I am good with. Um, I do have more of a laid back personality, but I make it known what I do expect. So sometimes I do feel like that helps. Um, if a student needs an extra day or two, if they need to come in later, come in early, things like that, I'm okay with working with them. Okay, if at least they're upfront and talking and asking questions, I'm okay with working through it. Okay, things happen, can't change it. We just know for next time. So, reading through his different articles and his different points, I do feel some things I have grown on and I've become a little bit better and proficient in, but I do know there's some things that I do need to work on as well. All right, so in our next article, um, it listed out 8 major standards that are tools of an effective online teacher. I loved the different examples because some of the wording was, a little complex, but I love that the examples broke it down. I was like, oh, okay, I can see how this works, how this doesn't work. After reading through all those different standards, I could see how a lot of it truly overlaps with face-to-face education. Um, for me, the 2 big standards that really stuck out to me as being different than face-to-face, not too in line, were most of the standards from section B, B1, B3, B4, all about digital pedagogy. For the most part, again, it's focused on the digital world, so not all that transfers into the face-to-face classroom. I did feel, however, standard B2, that online teachers incorporate discipline-specific technologies, tools, and resources to meet individualized learner needs. That's actually something we do use in at least my face-to-face classroom. As I said before, we do have one-to-one, and I want to be able to use those Chromebooks, those tools to help every learner. Some students may benefit from being on their Chromebooks and having the internet access, while some might be better with the workbook, pen and pencil, things like that. So, yes, it's more geared towards online, but I do feel like that's something that you can even use in the face-to-face classroom just to enhance each individual learner. There's more opportunities, and I think it's a little bit easier to streamline different tiers for different learners through an online portal rather than a worksheet. So that is the one where I do think that is similar. The other big standard that I thought was different was digital citizenship, just how to act on a computer, things like that, what you should, shouldn't do, and all that kind of thing. We do talk about that in face to face, but I guess not in the digital sense. Obviously, we talk about what you should or should not do in the classroom, getting up, touching, moving, things like that. So there's a slight overlap between that and face to face classroom citizenship, but I do feel like that's a little bit different. It was definitely more specific for the digital world. So aside from those 2, I feel like everything else is stuff we see in the face-to-face classroom, professional responsibilities. Okay, you gotta be professional in and outside the classroom. So whether it's online or in a brick and mortar classroom, you gotta be professional. Community building, that's something we definitely encourage at our middle school. Feeling like a family, working together, things like that. Diverse instruction, again, something that's not limited just to online. It might be a little bit easier, but it's just important in brick and mortar, face to face, finding different ways to encourage your students to do well. So, overall, a lot of those tools that we are used to already as teachers, I feel like is easy enough to transfer to be an effective online teacher. It's just, making some changes and again, go back to that flexibility and being patient and making it work. Now going back with standard E, digital citizenship, it is things we talk about in the classroom. Obviously, again, as I said, it's a little bit different in the digital world. And with that, I feel like that is definitely one of my difficulties. Not so much addressing what is expected, but just following through and making sure it does happen. So as in standard E2, It talks about educators creating expectations for what is to happen for academic integrity and appropriate use of the internet that adhere to program level policies. And before I go into that, I just want to point out standard F3 because I think these two kind of go hand in hand for me. The online teacher uses data, quantitative and qualitative, to identify learners who need additional support services. Clearly, they are very different ideas. How I see that they kind of overlap and why there are difficulties is sometimes, at least with my experience as a teacher, is I promote to my students, your online resources there are there to help you. Okay, they're not there to do your work, things like that. And for the most part, I show students it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to use it, but using it appropriately. I found that over time, though, there are the few that go over that line. They use the internet to do the work. They don't use it in an integral way that promotes an additional resource. It's almost like a replacement. So since they are using this as a replacement to, rather than doing the work themselves and making mistakes or asking questions and just Googling the answers, their data that I'm getting back does not actually match who they are as a learner. And sometimes it is hard to see in that virtual world. It's a little bit hard to identify those who are struggling because they're not trying or because they're using the internet, again, in a way that's not actually helping them. And since I don't have trustful data, it is a little bit hard to find those services that they might need because they're finding almost the easy way out. So that's, to me, is definitely something that's difficult as an online teacher, is finding a way to make sure students are using the internet in an appropriate way to allow them to grow and for me to help them grow. All right, and finally, after reading about some of the challenges of online teaching, I feel that I'm fortunate enough that my school, I'm able to grow. And I know one of the things mentioned in the article was not having the ability to make specific recommendations. Our school does use certain plans that we follow. However, there is room to ask questions to make changes. So I don't feel like that would be a personal challenge in the online world. As for time, I don't want to say that was a challenge. It definitely was a change. As they mentioned, I did sometimes feel that I was putting more work and time into the online world rather than just coming into the classroom and just teaching my students. But again, not a challenge, just a change. I truly felt after reading that article, the biggest challenge for myself personally was through student issues, which was not being able to create a sincere bond or connection with my students. We take great pride, as many of you do, in getting to know our students, not just in the classroom, but outside, what's happening in their house, outside their house, where they work, what's going on with their friends. And seeing students and being able to build that slowly face-to-face definitely comes a lot easier, at least to me. Just slowly building and then having that random moment, that random, in-person activity that kind of creates a small bond to allow them to trust you and things like that. They get to see me make some mistakes, make some jokes, and it just kind of builds upon this connection to make it a little bit easier to bond and connect and build and help them. I felt while teaching online, especially during COVID, obviously a lot of things were going on with different families and our students, but it did get frustrating, as they said. That's a perfect word to describe it. You're definitely limited. You see them through a computer, and even still, that's it. You're seeing them. You're not getting that full opportunity to talk to them outside the educational aspect. And I feel like I didn't get to create as much of a bond with them. And not having that bond, I do feel like affects their learning and their education, because if they feel like we don't care, even though we do, they're not going to want to try. And it's just hard for them to put themselves out there if they don't have that connection with us either. So definitely for me, the biggest challenge I think with online teaching is creating that connection and getting to know my students and being able to help them the same way I get to help them when we're face to face. I'm hoping, through this course and just all of these courses I'm able to take, that I can find a way to reach out and make an easier, better connection with my students online that, not only helps them, it helps me. So